I'm not going to give you the complete resume. She's a wonderful professor at Candler Seminary. Right, sorry about that.
Methodists are still alive.
She has a PhD and MDiv, and as I said last week, a diploma from Lubbock. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much. I was telling my mom last night, I think it's the first time my high school has been mentioned in the intro, but it means something here. So it is good to see you all. It's good to see you back. Hope you all slept well. This is a lovely image from the Luttrell Psalter, which has a lot of goofy marginalia like this that I really enjoy. And this is the sort of long stare I give people when they ask how I slept, which was not great last night. So as promised, I'm also going to begin this week with a discussion about empire and conversion. So what constitutes an empire and what role does conversion to particular religion play in solidifying that understanding of empire? But before we get to that dark stuff, I wanted to start with, as I promised from last week, we are always going to ask each other how we're feeling today. We're going to do a little emotional check-in, and we're going to do that using this medieval statuary, none of which are gargoyles. Fun fact, in order for something to be a gargoyle, it actually has to have a spout. So gargoyle is onomatopoetic. It's the sound of water gurgling out of a mouth. So which of these grotesques, turn to your buddy next to you, tell them which one you are and why you feel that way today. And yes, number 4 is on purpose for the coronation. Online friends, you can tell me in the chat which one you are.
What's on the bottom right?
The bottom right is a pelican.
And the other one is a lion, and 2 is a lion.
2 is a lion, 1 is a head sticking out of a book. All right, 3, we got some dragons. A queen, yeah, love it, I see it. An owl with a pigeon sitting on my head, you know, just I don't even know what's happening, but I'm here, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna be ready for all the things. John, which one are you? Which one are you feeling today? Number 1, all right, because you got a cool collar. What's going on there? Excellent. All right, friends, thank you for indulging my check-ins early in the week.
Curious.
Sorry?
I'm curious.
It's, yes, indeed, very. So the focus for this week's conversation, which is indeed, I think, appropriate on the day after a coronation, to think through the role of empire and the role that religion plays in empire. Did you notice there were a lot of religious folks at the coronation doing a lot of things that seemed integral to the functioning of that ceremony? The question you might be asking yourself is coronation a sacrament?
No.
Surely not, you say, and yet, it is absolutely a religious ritual. Otherwise, we would not have the Bishop of Canterbury there. We would not have symbolic representatives from other denominations there. It's the first time in many, 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 many years that a Catholic was present as a part of the coronation team. But first, obviously, if we define Great Britain as an empire, we have to define what an empire is. So how would you define an empire? Yeah, I know, it's tricksy.
A large imperialist something.
Okay, large imperialist. Okay, so what's imperialist? This is not a trick question. I'm
Well,
genuinely.
it's a country and all of the other countries that they have acquired along the way.
That's a beautifully tactful way of saying it. Yes, it's a country that has acquired other countries along the way. Absolutely. Yeah. We're not going to talk football in this class, I promise, or other sports. Not even sure what sport you're talking about, but yes, I'm going to use the definition of empire that number 1, a political entity that has named itself as such because it has an emperor or a basileus in Greek, and because as part of its history, this political entity has governed over other people and territories as the result of conquest. Generally speaking, military conquest. What role does religion then play in that acquiring of territory and the incorporating of that territory's people into the identity of the empire.
It's the excuse.
Okay, it's an excuse, yes.
It's the reason.
It's the reason to acquire. Why as a Christian, would we want to acquire more regions?
To convert them
To make
Christianity,
more
and-
Christians.
And that's,
It's, yes, manifest destiny. It's all getting roped in together. Yes, Leslie.
I was gonna say, that's the spoken
Yes,
plan,
Uh-huh.
I think it's really like domination.
exactly, because
Sometimes more political
Yes.
power than.
there are layers to this, as there are in so many ways. There are layers about the stated reasons for incorporating new territories and new peoples. And then there are more cultural, social, even psychological ones. What does it, yes, sir?
So, yeah, so for instance, the reason, but then it's also, doesn't it become a way, an assimilation tool?
Yes.
A unifying tool and a loyalty test.
Okay, brilliant. Use two words that are super important: loyalty and assimilation. When you become a part of a particular group that you weren't a part of before, the best way to cohere within that group is to become more like them and less like what you were. Yes, sir.
Well, by your definition, the United States is an empire
I concur.
because it conquered the Native Americans.
Absolutely.
Converted them.
1000%.
Assimilated them.
Yes.
to some extent.
Residential schools wherein Native children were taken away from their families and trained into a white Protestant identity as a part of making them more American. Yes.
To me, it comes across as using religion as a club, to club like an exclusive club.
Oh, yeah, I thought you meant that would work too. Yeah.
But to manipulate
Yes,
the masses.
Absolutely.
It's powerful manipulating those without power to help them gain more power.
are we having issues with the Zoom?
yeah, I'm just trying to make sure they can see you.
Oh, they can see me, I'm
If you
here.
stay right there.
Yes, I will stay right here, absolutely. So the question is this a club that you beat someone over the head with, or is it a club that you tout as exclusive, right? You want to be in this club because there are benefits to being in the club, right?
And yes.
Yes, and yes, absolutely, I
The
appreciate it.
benefits largely inure to the powerful, not to the people.
Absolutely.
without power.
But that is certainly not the story we tell when we invite people into the club,
Correct.
right? Because we need people to do things in the club for the powerful, right? So we all agree that empire is usually the result of conquest. It's the kind of thing that requires then an integration of those peoples that have been conquered into the identity of the conqueror in many nuanced ways. So one of the things I want you to think about is sort of the things that this class is hoping to disabuse you of, the lies that we tell. One of which is Islam is a religion of violence, and that Islam is more conflict prone than other religions. The corollary to this is the false statement that Christianity is not a violent religion, which is patently false. And it is something that we will see very clearly here. Where does the story of Islam as a religion of violence come from? It comes from contemporary notions of jihad. It comes from engagement with the ideas around 9/11 and the narratives that were crafted there. It also comes from the suggestion that the Quran and the origin of Islam is violent. So what I'd like to show you today is that the origin of Christianity as a political entity was violent, more violent than the origins of Islam as a political identity. So that's what we'll be discussing today. So what was the first Christian empire? One second, I promise I'll ask. Yeah, go ahead.
If your definition of imperialism,
Yes.
could this also apply to marriage?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Wait a minute. As in marriage is a tool of integration to the new place, or marriage itself is an empire?
Well.
Domination.
just-
Okay. Again, a lot of layers, a lot of layers. My husband is watching. We're going to keep moving. Awesome. But that's a really great question. And one of the ways we're going to talk about is the layers and the different routes with which one could be integrated into that new cultural identity. And marriage absolutely is one of them, for the record.
I don't mean to be facetious.
No, I don't think you are.
But if you look at the traditional relationship.
Oh, the handing over.
The males seems to
Oh,
be
sure.
the aggressor.
Sure.
You know, they have to ask approval to,
Yes.
whatever.
Absolutely.
They're the ones who are required to kneel down and.
Oh, indeed.
propose.
Honor and obey and all that.
This
Mhm.
is really gonna be great.
Yes. That's a really great point. There are a lot of institutions that are modeled on the engagement between political institutions, and marriage as a legal contract actually is part of that identity formation. Well, we can definitely talk about that after class, but I wanted to sort of begin today talking about the origins of Christianity as a part of empire. Where would you locate that? And who is this dude with the bulging eyeballs? Constantine, yes. Yes, so what we're gonna do, we got a ringer in class today. I'm gonna make you stop answering questions about it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about that we don't often talk about is what preceded Constantine's conversion to Christianity. Why was Christianity appealing to Constantine at this moment in Roman history? As you may know, or may not know, the Emperor Diocletian, ruling in the 280s, was the first emperor to separate the two halves of what was the Roman Empire into a Western Roman Empire and an Eastern Roman Empire. The reason that Diocletian did this is because there had been a huge crisis in the 3rd century of Rome, where there had been over a dozen people in about 5 years that all claimed to be the Roman emperor, many of whom were supported by different warring sections of the Roman military. So when Diocletian came to rule, his job was to create stability and order. And the way that he thought it would be best to do this would be to recognize that the Western portion of the empire and the Eastern portion of the empire had culturally never been fully united. And so he appointed a Caesar, a junior emperor in the East and West, and then he appointed an Augustus, a senior emperor on the East and the West. And this is one of my favorite images of the tetrarchs. It looks like they're buddies. This is Porphyry statue. They're all hanging out, maybe taking a selfie. They're just chilling. It suggests in many ways that the tetrarchy was the answer to this question of where are we going to find order? Did the tetrarchy work? Absolutely not.
Look at the hands on there.
Oh, they got the hand on the sword and the hand on the buddy. Absolutely. Very good eye, Leslie. So the tetrarchy doesn't work for a variety of reasons. One was there was absolutely no plans for follow-up. What happens if a senior emperor dies? Does the junior emperor get promoted? Does he pick a new guy? Does it like a vice president and a president where the whole group is out if one of them is out? Not a whole lot of great planning. And so after Diocletian, by the way, Diocletian was the emperor under which Christianity received the most persecution and was the target of a lot of very specific persecution in Asia Minor. After Diocletian, everything falls apart all over again. And Constantine emerges from this new chaos mere years after the original chaos, where the whole foundational identity of the empire has fallen apart, and he comes to lead after a series of more and more civil wars. So if you are, I would say if we had a corollary, Constantine is the Abraham Lincoln of the Roman Empire. There's been a long period of civil war, of instability. What the empire needs is good glue to hold it together. And the glue that Constantine chose was Christianity. What is the story of how he identified Christianity as the religion that he would undertake? He was on the battlefield. He saw in the sunlight a cross, some sort, it's a labarum, a key row, perhaps. It's very wishy-washy about what exactly he saw, but he heard in that moment at this battle, in this sign, you shall conquer, according to Constantine and all the people who write about Constantine. And after that moment, the battle turns in his favor and he wins. And so Constantine decides this is going to be his religion. Coinage, one of the best things we can see iconographically about the identity of the empire is to look at how they mint coins. What is on the coin? So this is a coin minted in 327, 328 under Constantine. It has Spes Publica, which is the Republic, the hope of the Republic. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the banner, the standard that the Roman armies would carry. If you're a fan of really bad historical movies, and I do mean really bad, check out Channing Tatum's The Eagle, in which the young man from Save the Last Dance and Magic Mike plays a Roman soldier going to steal back one of the standards that has been lost. It is so bad. It's so bad it's good, in my opinion. Anyway, so we have Constantine on the left. What do you notice about the iconography of Constantine on the left? What does he look like to you?
Like classic Greek.
Classic Greco-Roman emperor / god, right? Because in the Roman Empire, there was something called the imperial cult, wherein members of the Roman community did rituals related to praying for and on behalf of the emperor, right? This was a part of what it meant to be Roman. You did not worship the emperor, you prayed for him, and there were rituals associated with it. So it made sense for Constantine to see himself in this way, as pseudo-god, specifically looking a lot like Apollo. I'm gonna talk about that in a second. And we have the Roman standard on the right. This is what happens a little bit later in 350. On the left-hand side, we see somebody that looks maybe a little bit less godlike, more warlike. And on the right, we actually have Constantine standing, being crowned by the goddess Victory, holding a standard that now has the key row on it, rather than the 3 dots that were part of the Roman military standard. So the key row has gone from the top to the center. And around the outside, we have hoc signo victor eris. In this sign, you will conquer. So many of you are thinking, boy, Christianity absolutely became a part of who Constantine was, probably became a part of what the Roman Empire was, right? Wasn't Constantine the first person to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire? No. That doesn't happen until Theodosius II in 385, as Joanna mentioned. What happens here is that Christianity becomes an acceptable religion within the empire. And this is just to show you the English Defense League that works, that is a right-wing militarized group in the UK that campaigns against immigration, specifically Islamic immigration, has a cross and in hoc signo vinces. So the story that's being told there is that these folks who are working against immigration to the UK are aligning themselves, seeing themselves as Constantine, who wasn't really Christian. This is what his sort of plan was. The Edict of Milan, which as you can see is in the name of both Constantine as well as Licinius. We were considering everything that pertained to public welfare, and we thought we should grant to Christians and others full authority to observe the religion that each preferred, since any divinity whatsoever in the seat of the heavens may be propitious and kindly disposed to us all who are placed under our rule. And thus, no one whatsoever should be denied the opportunity to give his heart to the observance of the Christian religion, or of that religion which he should think best for himself, so that the supreme deity to whose worship we freely yield our hearts may show in all things his usual favor and benevolence.
That's a pretty nice thing.
It's remarkably egalitarian. And it does not, it sort of implies Christianity is the right option, but it doesn't require it, right? So, dear English Defense League, I think you got Constantine a little wrong. Constantine, I don't want to go into the logistics of, or the discussion of whether or not Constantine's conversion was authentic. Absolutely no way of knowing. I will say it was very, very, very convenient glue to keep the empire together. An empire that had been fractured for about 50 years and been through a series of civil war. And Constantine's sort of suggestion that we could have all the different the emperor cult, we could have all the gods in our favor, sort of notes in prior to his conversion, Constantine was a really big fan of Apollo, the sun god, Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun god, which in many ways to Constantine was very similar to a Jesus figure. And so whether or not we're working on some conflation of the emperor cult, some idea about Apollo, or we're looking at a real genuine conversion, this is the moment in history where Christianity becomes part of a political entity. Not an official formal part, but this is the part where those two things start to merge. And we can actually see this iconographically shifting in the way the folks, the Roman artists, start to depict Jesus. So on this side, we've got Constantine and we've got Sol Invictus over here. Now we've got Jesus in Santa Pudenziana in the 4th century. What do you notice about this?
White.
He's very white, absolutely.
Throne.
He's sitting on a throne. He's literally sitting on a throne in a palace above a city. He is very alive. There is a cross, but it's not a wooden cross. It's a bedazzled cross. It's a Roman cross, yes.
What's the meaning of the animal, the winged animal?
Yeah.
Those are all the gospel writers. So each gospel author has a particular animal or person associated with him. You can't see John on the far left side, but the cow and I should know all of these, but they're the gospel writers. I'm not going to go into specifics of which one's which. But everything about this image says Christ, the corollary on earth, is the Roman emperor. Everything he's wearing is very Roman. Everybody's looking at him, praising him, right? And you actually can't see this, but it's on the thing. It's about on the book. The inscription is that this church has been dedicated to God. So there's Santa Pudenziana.
It's a very Last Supper look.
It is, except it's a Roman supper, right? We have people reclining. There's nothing ancient Near Eastern about.
Well, architecture too.
Absolutely, it's a specific architecture. It's actually Jerusalem. Okay, we went bigger. We went bigger than a specific city. Now we have Jesus sitting on the world. This is a specific iconographic image called the Christ Pantocrator, the ruler of the world. And you'll also notice we're having gold, again, is the visual color component that's keeping this all together. So he's sitting on the world, literally ruling the world. And at the Church of Cosmos and Damian, we have a little bit variety of skin tone, but we still have him standing on top of things with the gospel, with other folks underneath offering crowns.
Sarah, what are the dates of these?
All of these are 4th and 5th century. So these are a little bit after Constantine and a little bit into rulers that follow him. So again, I don't want to make any specific claims about Constantine's authenticity as a Christian. I do want to claim that this moment in history sees a shift in the understanding of the role of Jesus and the role of Christianity vis-a-vis political entities. And you can see that in the way the iconographers depict Jesus as an emperor. And there are certainly parts of that in the New Testament, but there are also parts where he's specifically anti-imperial, anti-Rome, very specifically anti-Rome. It wasn't the Jews that killed him, it was Rome, right? So it's fascinating. So after Constantine, you'll see that we have the Eastern and Western Roman Empire first. This is obviously in 406, and then we have the quote unquote fall of the Western Roman Emperor, the Western Roman Empire. This happens in 476. If anyone asks you on Jeopardy when Rome fell, you should say 476, but the real answer is it was a long, slow decline. And 476 is just as arbitrary as 406, but we're not going to deal with that today. What you should notice about this map is that there are a lot of teeny-tiny little bubbles here that represent different local tribes, all of whom have been pushed out of Asia by the expansion of the Hunnic Empire. And what I want you to notice is what happens. This is in 406. What happened to 562.
Whoa.
Whoa,
When
This
was
is a
San Vitale?
sorry?
When was San Vitale?
San Vitale is the beginning of the 5th century. Yep,
And it's in Ravenna.
yep. Yep. Good eye.
So it's the later map.
It is the later map, yep. So we have the Huns pushing everybody forward. There are a bunch of different cultural entities here, but of those, one particular group seems to take over. What group is that? The Mongols, absolutely. The Avars, the Persian Empire. What about in Western Europe? The Franks. The Frankish Empire, does that sound like a country that you know something about? France, I'm not, yeah.
What makes a Frankish empire?
We're gonna talk about that right now. Thank you, Velma, that was a great cue. I didn't even have to. So what made a Frankish kingdom? What brought a particular tribal group out of something that might be termed a tribe into something that has graduated to kingdom status? Maybe not empire status, but kingdom status. Well, that's a really great question. There's a particular ruler named Clovis, who was one of the Franks, who was a king and was running around making war as they are wont to do. And it happened, according to Gregory of Tours, that during one of the battles, there was great slaughter between the Frankish tribe and the Alemanni, which were another tribe. Clovis, this king's army, was near utter destruction. He saw the danger and his heart was stirred. He was moved to tears and he raised his eyes to heaven, saying, Jesus Christ, whom Clotilda declared to be the Son of the living God, who it is said, givest aid to the oppressed and victory to those who put their hope in thee. I beseech the glory of thy aid. If thou shalt grant me victory over these enemies, and I test that power which people consecrated to those names, say they have proved concerning thee, I will believe in thee and be baptized in thy name. Obviously, this is very fancy. This was Latin. What's he saying here? If I win, Jesus, I'm gonna convert everybody. It's gonna be great. Yes, but only if I win. When he said these things, spoiler alert, God followed through. When he said these things, the Alemanni turned their backs and began to flee. When they saw that their king was killed, they submitted to the sway of Clovis, saying, we wish that no more people should perish. Now we are yours. When the king had forbidden further war and praised his soldiers, he told the queen how he had won the victory by calling on the name of Christ. Does this remind you of anyone we just talked about? Constantine, yes. So the question is twofold. One, what's at stake for Gregory of Tours and Clovis? Gregory of Tours is a famous bishop of the 6th century, one of the few that has actually chronicled this period, which is, if we're going to say it, the dark of the dark ages. It was rough time, Merovingians fighting all the time. Gregory is one of their chroniclers, and what's at stake for Gregory in telling this story this way?
He didn't get killed.
Yes, and do you notice I didn't say it there. He's actually a bishop. Yeah. Gregory is a bishop of Tours. Now, there had been, post-fall of the Western Roman Empire, one of the things that stabilized the West, that sort of maintained a little bit of the network that the Western Roman Empire's infrastructure had built, was the church. Mostly because Roman elites were actually bishops and things like that. Gregory descends from a Roman senatorial family. So both missionary in sort of sticking out what's happening in the West, and also maybe re-allying with a new political entity. So there's stuff at stake for the church in this narrative. There's also stuff at stake for Clovis. And what's interesting about this particular story is it's one of the few from the Merovingian period that includes a significant female character. Clotilda is not, in fact, Frankish. She is Burgundian, which now is all part of France, but at the time were different cultural units. And Clotilda was Burgundian, and the Burgundians were Christian. And she had tried for years to get her husband converted. In fact, she had one of their sons baptized. And when that son died, Clovis said, this isn't it. So when we see images of the baptism of Clovis, you see Clotilda lurking over there on this right-hand side. It's really her, and obviously also Gregory of Tours doing the blessing, and this is the Holy Spirit coming down to bless Clovis. So what we see in both these instances is that a particular story of military victory is undergirded by Christianity as both the reason for the success and the reason then for subsequent conversion. Because at this time, the same with Constantine, when a leader converts, everybody else comes along. All the Franks are going to be Christian now. Does that mean that in practice, random Frankish dude walking down the street is going to be like, yes, let me tell you about the creeds? No. It's a cultural identity. And this is how religion gets baked into what it means to be a part of a political group. If you are Frankish, now you are Christian. Yes.
What happened to love your neighbor and serve the poor?
Oh, no. No, we don't do that. Yeah, absolutely. And it gets worse. Sorry. Charlemagne makes it even worse. Hey, guess what? Who knows Marie Le Pen?
Not personally.
Yes, good. She and her father are members of the far right-wing political group in modern day France, contemporary France. Also, like the English Defense League, anti-immigrant, anti-anybody that isn't French, also big fans of French Empire as a concept. And she said in 2011, throughout our French 1500-year history, we have sought the unity which makes us unique, but this unity is a jewel we must continuously cherish. What was the purpose of Clovis's baptism, if not the building and consolidation of national unity? She said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of Clovis's baptism, if not the building and consolidation of national unity? The masterpiece of the unifier kings, Henry IV and his Paris is surely worth a mass, the builders of our cathedrals, Bonaparte's codes, the Black Hussars of the Third Republic, the resistance of the 1940s, or the soldiers of our empire. There's a lot of stories that just got mashed up together, but the first one is Clovis. And she sees from 2011, the moment of Clovis's baptism, much like the moment where Constantine sees the Labarum on Milvian Bridge, this Christianity is a tool, can be a tool for cultural unity, national unity here.
How does that get passed down? I mean,
We're going to talk about it.
okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. We're only in the 6th century. Don't worry. The whole class gets like that, but we'll get to continue. Yeah. The Nazis do the best job of this, by the way, in the origins of the German Empire. Maul the Ottonian periods. Horrifying. Okay. So we've seen Constantine, we've seen Clovis, both of which succeed and name their success as a result of praying to Christ. What is the success? Military victory. So we've got an equation coming here. Leader, whose name conveniently begins with C, the next one does too, plus Jesus equals empire, military conquest. Yeah. All right, so we've got the Frankish Empire, the Frankish kingdoms. The other piece that you didn't name, but that is the huge part of this, of course, is the Umayyad Caliphate, right? This is the beginnings of Islam and the beginnings of Islam as a political entity. So what I want to show you, you can't really see it super well, the dark green, the darkest green, are the original expansion of Islam as a political entity to 632. 30 years later, they have the next darkest green, all of this stuff. And then 100 years after that, they have Spain all the way over to Kabul. So by anybody's standards, this is an exceedingly rapid expansion. And you can understand then how the folks up here get a little freaked out by this rapid expansion, right? Do we think that this expansion and its conquests were more or less violent than the two we just talked about? We'll find out. So as you may know, the revelation comes to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel when he's a 40-year-old man. After he receives this revelation and begins to explore the consequences of that revelation, and he does some preaching in the city of Mecca, most people are not thrilled with him. Nobody likes change. In the Arabian Peninsula, there are a number of different religions at this time, including Christianity and Islam, as well as tribal religions. The Kaaba, which is the central space there that many of you know as central to Islam, was already a central sacred space prior to Islam. And in it were a number of different idols, a number of different representations of a number of different religions. And part of pilgrimage is the money that's associated with pilgrimage. And boy, the leading powers that be in Mecca are like, this new religion is going to mean we don't have control over all these pilgrims that come here. So he gets expelled from Mecca and ends up in Medina. And remember how we talked last week about how ideas of religion and political units sort of can shape both space and time? We're seeing now how all these expansions shape space. I told you AD, right? Anno Domini was first used by the Venerable Bede in the 8th century. Well, guess what predates that? AE, AH. The move from Mecca to Medina is called the Hijra, and it's the origin of the Islamic calendar, which is lunar rather than solar. And so Islamic historical texts will always be AH, Anno Hejri, in the year, from the year of the Hijra. So what we see here in this, nascent emerging religion is the idea, the degree to which that religion shapes someone's identity, superseding in many ways other aspects of their cultural identity. Which again, you can understand why local folks on the Arabian Peninsula are not thrilled about this, right? Because now we have an identity that transcends tribal markers. It's a religion that's a transcendent cultural identity, which is scary because that's the thing that leads to empire. Islam, as the word in Arabic, means submission. It means submission to God, and Muslims are those who submit to God and his messenger. Spoiler alert, lots of people you will know make an appearance in the Quran, including Jesus. For Muslims, Muhammad is the final prophet, the ultimate prophet. But other prophets in other faiths are prophets that have something to say to their people. What's unique about Muhammad is the finality of his revelation and the fact that this revelation was for this people at this time. Everything that comes in the Quran is the divinely spoken word of God. So if we were going to make corollaries to the Trinity, which we should not, but if we were, the Quran is more akin to the second person of the Trinity. It is the word of God lived out. Muhammad is not Jesus. Muhammad is a human person. He is not divine. However, the Quran has real power in the way that scripture has power for us as Christians. In addition to the Quran as figuring out how this new religion functions, we also have the Hadith literature. The Quran is not a narrative. It doesn't tell stories. It's sort of a series of vignettes. So as you can imagine, that doesn't, it's like if we only had Proverbs, right? Which is kind of hard to follow and says some stuff that we need to contextualize. The Hadith literature offers some of that context. It's about the way Muhammad lived his life. And while those stories are very, very important, they never supersede the Quran in theological significance. So we have the Quran, this recitation. We also start to see as Islam builds and expands, this expansion of stories about what it means to be Muslim, right? Similar to how we see in the early forms of Christianity, right? We start to see the Gospels. How is it that Jesus lived his life? What can we learn? How do we do this religion? Now we know what we think and believe. How do we do it, right? So many liturgical practices, for example, the suggestion that they pray 5 times a day, facing in a particular suggestion. That logistic was worked out over time in much the same way that our liturgies were worked out over time. There is nothing in the New Testament that tells us we should have worship exactly as we're going to have it over there, right? There's not an order of worship in the New Testament. We have a lot of, we have the Didache and some early liturgical texts, but all of this stuff is developing as it's being lived out. And so it may be interesting to you, it's certainly interesting to me, that the shape Islam takes eventually becomes collected around 5 particular things. And this is from the Hadith of Gabriel, and it says, the first is the only core, the one thing in order to be Muslim, you need to be able to testify that there's no deity save Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger. That's the only non-negotiable. Everything else follows from that. You should perform the salah, a ritual prayer, where you note in this hadith, it doesn't say how many times or facing where. You should pay the zakah, which is alms. You should fast during Ramadan and perform the Hajj, a pilgrimage to the Kaaba, if you can find a way to do it or find the means to make the journey. These are the core tenets of Islam. What do you notice about it?
It's all about personal practice.
Yes.
It's not about how do you treat other people.
They're action oriented.
They are all actions, and none of them are don't do this. They're all positives, right? And they're all actions. If we think about the core tenets of Christianity, I'm sure we could come up with a lot of places to look for those, but compare this to a creed. The Apostles' Creed is a statement of belief.
Of belief in the divinity.
Yep.
And it's theological.
It's theological.
It says nothing about what.
Doing anything. Just pointing this out. Also, nowhere here does it have anything about violence. In fact, paying the zakah is about contributing to the larger community of the faithful, very significantly. And what we see here is that the ummah is the community of the faithful, and this community of the faithful transcends individual tribal identities in such a way that it expands rapidly because people see this and are convinced that this community is meaningful, right? So that expansion happens through military conquest. It also happens through conversion, where people voluntarily convert to Islam. We don't actually see a similar story of the deity or someone appearing to a Muslim to encourage their battle until the 8th century, when Tariq ibn Ziyad leads a group of Berbers who are from North Africa into the Iberian Peninsula into Spain. And according to legend, Muhammad appeared to him as he slept on his ship, encouraging him to move forward. And this is when we see that expansion from North Africa into Spain, almost up to the front door of the Franks, AKA the Pyrenees, the mountain range between modern day France and Spain. So what happens here? Well, we start to see Islam creating patterns by which they would incorporate non-Muslims into their culture. So if you were a Christian or you were a Jew, you actually had an option of not converting under Muslim rule. You had the option to participate in a dhimmi, which is a contract or pact of protection. And these began in the 7th and 8th centuries. The core of them is this: you submit to Muslim leadership and then you receive protection. You are allowed to live under your faith. You do have to pay a tax. And the precedent for this is in Hadith literature about how Muhammad offered this particular contract of protection to the Jews in the Khaybar Peninsula and the Christians who were in Najran. So you'll notice I'm not whitewashing any of the conquest. I am not suggesting that there wasn't violence, but there is a legal precedent for people to live peacefully as second-class citizens, no doubt, but to live peacefully under Muslim rule. Okay? So this is what's happening with Islam. At this exact same time, we start to see a movement from the Frankish rulers who were Clovis's group, the Merovingians, we start to see that shift because they really are titular kings at this point and don't have any actual authority. Their prime ministers, the major domo, which is a fabulous word, this ruling family, the Carolingians, start to take over for them. And the way they make this shift from being just the prime minister to being the full-on king is through defeating the Muslims at the Battle of Tours. Charles Martel, who at that time, he has a great name, the Hammer, better than like the Simple. There's also a Charles the Simple and a Charles the Fat. So I would choose the Hammer if I had an option. So Charles Martel raises an army and defeats the Umayyad advance into Iberia at the Battle of Tours in 732. This is the moment in which Frankish identity becomes not just Christian, but it's Christian over and against Islam. It expands the borders of Francia. We've moved from kingdom to actual empire at this point for the Frankish kingdom. And it's for the first time we really see Francia being an explicitly Christian entity. The way he does this is by taking this victory, creating rhetoric around it, and appointing a whole lot of bishops and allying with local elites, all of whom now, yes, sir.
Well, the Muslims were trying to take over France, weren't they?
That's the narrative, isn't it?
Tours is in France.
Tours is in France. Yep, absolutely. It's in France.
Repeat the question, though.
Oh, the question was, weren't they
Whatever it was.
incurred? Yes, absolutely. This is not, the narrative is the Muslims are coming to destroy Christianity. Absolutely. And it's not wrong. We talked the first week about Cord Whitaker's idea of these shimmering metaphors, that there is a fact here, which is Islam has expanded rapidly all the way through North Africa, through the Iberian Peninsula, and it's coming in this pincher motion for Western Europe. That was happening. The part where that gets shimmering is the idea that that has something to do with stamping out Christianity. The rhetoric that gets slapped on top of this victory is not just, man, we defeated the Umayyad Caliphate because that was a great military victory. It's we defended Christianity from the infidels. So yes, this is a historical fact, but the layers that you get on top of that are what make it this really terrifying story. And you can see here, this is a 19th century image, painting, obviously not image, of the Battle of Tours. What do you notice here? Big old cross.
Good guys.
Classic good guy on the white horse. Bad guys threatening women and children, looking very scary, and also not like us. This is where we start to get what is Christianity. It's not just Frankish cultural identity. It's not Islam. And Charlemagne, this was the New Zealand terrorist assault rifle, where he murdered 60 plus worshipers in mosques. You'll see at the bottom right here, Battle of Tours 732. Right here. Yep. Unless we think this ended with Charles Martel, the greatest leader of the Carolingians, from whom they get their name, Charlemagne, takes over in 771 is when he takes over. He founds a stable capital in Aachen in the New Rome, and he oversees what's called the Carolingian Renaissance. The beginning of the Carolingian Renaissance is when Charlemagne troops down to Rome, and on Christmas Day in the year 800 is shocked to be crowned as Emperor of the Romans. Einhard, his biographer, says that Charlemagne was really upset about this. There may be a grain of truth to it, though, because if you think about this, suggests in some ways that it is a clerical, a church institutional person who can name someone an emperor. And this is the beginning of what we call the Franco-Papal Alliance, where the papacy receives protection from the many other things that are going on the Italian peninsula, from the Frankish Empire. And in return, Charlemagne gets the title of emperor and has that title bestowed on him in a liturgically undergirded ritual. Not a sacrament, definitely a ritual. Okay? So what does he do with this new bestowed upon identity as one chosen by God? This is one of those divine right of kings moments, friends. Well, he sponsors a whole lot of amazing building church projects. Love it. Go to Aachen if you can. Not he himself, he has leaders, amazing scholars who are responsible for modern fonts. Caroline minuscule is the reason that we can read anything that we do today. Thank you, Charlemagne. What's on the bottom is Caroline minuscule. What's on the top is handwriting before that. Thanks, man, right? We appreciate it. He also oversaw a number of really beautiful architectural and iconographic artwork. So this is a cup that was made during the period of Clovis, and this is a cup that was made during the period of Charlemagne. Just a different level of sophistication. Neither is bad, just this one's fancier. We also see this creation of these picture poems, Carmina Figurata, where they read left to right, but also in the image, like a crossword puzzle, new things are lifted up. So this nimbus, which is the fancy word for these crowns around their head, says, Tu Ludovicum Christe Corona, which means you, Louis, Charlemagne's grandson, is crowned with the cross of Christ. Amazing. He standardizes everything about what it means to live in the Carolingian period. He creates canon law. He says everybody who's doing this monasticism thing, they all have to follow Benedict's rule. He standardizes liturgy. So everyone is doing the same liturgy. So none of these local weirdo liturgies, we're all using the Gregorian sacramentary. He also revives education, because there's nothing quite like education to disseminate particular ideologies, both good and bad, right? I know, we're gonna talk about that next week. Dylan's freaking out, it's all good. He's also fighting a number of different people. The Lombards are the ones that the Romans are particularly concerned about. He has limited, and I do mean very limited, success against Islam on the Western border. Hilariously, the Song of Roland, which is written in the 11th century, is a rewriting of how successful the Carolingians were against the Muslims. It didn't happen. And also another really, really, really racialized depiction. Yeah. Yep. The most important piece that I want to talk to you about is the Saxons. The Saxons are in northern Germany. They are a tribal identity that is never fully integrated into the Carolingian Empire. The way that they do that is, the way that Charlemagne gets people into his empire is by murdering them. In 782, Charlemagne is said to have decapitated 4,500 Saxon prisoners at Verdun who refused to convert. Burned their sacred groves. And the goal here is conversion and enculturation into Carolingian ideals. So I'll just leave you with this. This is a prayer that was prayed for Charlemagne. Grant him, omnipotent God, to be a most mighty protector of the fatherland and a comforter of churches and holy monasteries with the greatest piety of royal munificence, and to be the mightiest of kings, triumphing, oh, this is good theme music, triumphing over his enemies, so as to crush rebels and heathen nations, and may he be very terrible to his enemies with the utmost strength of royal potency. What glory will be yours on the day of eternal requital, most blessed King, when all those converted from worship of idols to recognition of the true God by your righteous care will attend you as you stand. Blessed in your lot before the judgment seat of our Lord Jesus Christ, and your return of eternal beatitude is made greater for the reason of them all. Behold the great devotion and benevolence with which you have toiled to soften the harshness of the unhappy people of the Saxons, that the name of Christ might be spread.
Thanks be to God.
Amen. Right? And you have to go to worship, so I'll just say, this is where it starts to get scary. And it's going to just get worse next week. So come back to hear how it's going to get worse. Thank y'all so much. Yes.